Welcome to Purpose Driven Church for Unificationists. Today we are on Chapter 11, Developing Your Strategy. Um, it's surprising that Rick Warren starts off by talking about fishing. He talks about how his dad is an amazing fisherman and he's always able to catch more fish than anybody else. Even if there's a whole bunch of people fishing, he seems to know how to catch the fish even if no one else can. And it's kind of interesting that he makes that comparison since our true father talks about fishing a lot as well. He talks about how as he got older, he started to realize why his dad was so successful at fishing. It was not because he had some special secret or because he was, special himself in some way, but because he knew exactly where and when to and how to catch the fish. He made it easy and attractive as possible for fish to swallow his hook, so they did. He caught fish on their terms. While my dad would go crawl through brush or get wet up to his waist in order to get to where the fish were, my fishing spots were usually determined by what was most comfortable to me. So, his dad knew all about what kind of lures and what kind of bait and and where the fish are at certain times of the day and when they're more interested in feeding and all these different details that allowed him to be able to target what would be the most effective way to catch the fish, the easiest way for them to grab that bait, and then he always ended up being more successful than other people. And he kind of uses this comparison with the church in that many times we try to reach people in the way that's most comfortable for us, but it's not necessarily the way that people are looking for. It's not necessarily the things that people are looking for or ways in which are going to be attractive to people. So make it actually difficult for them to grab the bait, so to speak, versus creating something that's actually very, very appealing to them. So, he says there's no one size fits all approach to fishing, which, is true. There's so many different kinds of fish. Every fish is different. So yeah, anyway, he spends a lot of time talking about that, and then he goes to talking about timing and how if it's a waste of time to fish on a spot if the fish aren't biting there, even if it's a spot where they were biting at one point, maybe they're not biting at another point because they're only hungry a certain time of the day. So he says that same with people. People are more responsive to spiritual truth at certain points in their life. And these are oftentimes windows that don't really last a long time. But there's certain times in people's life where they're more receptive to hearing about spiritual truth than other times. He says that I believe the Holy Spirit wants to direct us to the people He's already prepared to respond. Jesus told us not to worry about the unresponsive. Shake the dust off your feet and move on. Likewise, we should not focus our efforts on those who aren't ready to listen. There are far more people in the world who are ready to receive Christ than there are believers ready to witness to them. So here he's talking about many times the tendency to try to reach out to the same person over and over again, or try to reach out and revive a person who's been really unresponsive or really negative for a long time. He says, it's not a bad thing to do that, but there's also many other people who might really be open and ready to hear what you have now. And it might be really a waste of your time to try to keep knocking on that door that's not going to ever open for you. He talks about how we think and how if we want to reach out to what he calls unbelievers, we have to think like they think. We have to think, what's important to them, what's going to be appealing to them. But the challenge for religious people is often that it's really hard to think like an unbeliever because the longer you're a believer, the harder it is to think like an unbeliever. Because all our relationships and friendships and conversations revolve around our beliefs many times. Many people don't even have any friends outside of the circle of their church or their community. So over time, it becomes difficult to even think like them. And we start using our jargon and our terminology that outside people don't even understand. He says the spiritual terminology that Christians are familiar with is just gibberish to unbelievers. If you want to advertise your church to the unchurched, you must learn to think and speak as they do. Churches, anyway, he just kind of goes on to talk about the importance of being able to communicate on the level of where people are at. Over and over again, he talks about going to where people are at, not necessarily trying to communicate what's important to us and then just kind of hoping that attracts some people, but really like thinking, who are we trying to reach and how can we best communicate to them on their level that's going to be meaningful to them. He ends this section by talking a little bit about when he first began and how he went around to his community and he surveyed them and he asked them 5 questions. He asked them, what do you think is the greatest need in your area? Are you actively attending any church? What do you think most people, why do you think most people don't attend church? If you were looking for a church to attend, what kind of thing would you look for? He says that particular question and all the answers that came with it taught him more about how unbelievers think than going through his entire seminary training. And then lastly, what could I do for you? What advice can you give to a minister who really wants to be helpful for people? And then he ends by saying, if you study the Bible, Jesus often asked, what do you want me to do for you? And so he really emphasized that even Jesus started with what were people's needs. And so there's no reason why we can't have that way of thinking also. How can I address your need? And so he really recommends this kind of concept of speaking to the people, getting to know them. If you really have a passion to reach out to these people, witness to them, then you need to get to know them. And especially if you're in a situation where you don't know what people are thinking, then this is a great way to do it through the surveys. That's all for today. Thanks a lot.